Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories in English. Fluency in English is something that many people want to achieve. I remember well when I was a young student, just like you. I also wanted to speak English confidently and fluently, but I was shy and made a lot of mistakes. One day, a teacher said something to me that completely changed my way of thinking. You can be fluent if you practice every day. These words had a profound impact on my life. When you want something, you need to work hard to achieve it. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. It's like planting a tree. You place the seed in the ground, water it and take care of it patiently. Just like when learning English, daily dedication makes all the difference. So, start today, practice constantly, and never give up. The result will come, just like a tree that grows strong and healthy over time. Fluency in English is like caring for a tree. You water it, take care of it every day, and over time, it grows strong and healthy. Likewise, learning a language requires patience and constant dedication. One day, you realize you've made it. The fluency tree is there, big and solid. I remember a student who came to me very sad. She said, "Teacher, I want to speak English, but I always forget the words." I smiled at her and said, "Don't worry. Fluency doesn't mean remembering every word. It means constantly practicing." She looked at me with hope in her eyes and asked, "But how can I practice?" I explained to her that the practice is everywhere. You can practice by talking to your friends, listening to stories, singing songs, watching movies, or even reading. The important thing is to engage with the language every day. Small daily actions make all the difference on the path to fluency. So, take advantage of the opportunities around you and never stop practicing. I remember when I was at school and I loved hearing stories. Every night, my teacher read to the class, and I repeated the words. At first, I was pretty slow, but over time, I got faster. I learned new words, and my confidence began to grow. One day, a student asked me, "Teacher, is being fluent just talking fast?" I smiled and replied, "No, fluency isn't about speed. It's about speaking clearly so people understand what you're saying. It's not necessary to speak quickly. The important thing is to speak with confidence." I remember a boy in my class who spoke very quickly, but no one could understand him. This showed me that fluency goes beyond speed. It's clarity and the ability to express yourself in a way that connects you to others. So, don't worry about running. Focus on communicating well and confidently. There was a boy in my class who spoke very quickly, but no one could understand what he was saying. I told him, "Speak slowly, clearly, and use simple words." He listened to my advice, and, in a short time, everyone came to understand him. He felt more confident and began to enjoy speaking English. Fluency is like a journey. You take one step at a time, taking your time, enjoying the process. And then, one day, you look back and realize how far you've come. I've seen many students who, at first, were afraid to speak, but with practice and patience, they became fluent. There is a simple secret to achieving fluency, something anyone can do. Listen to others carefully. It is by listening to stories, music, and conversations that you learn to communicate better. Fluency starts with listening. This is how you connect with the language and begin to gain confidence in speaking. Listening is the key to learning English. Listen to stories, music, and conversations. The more you listen, the more you learn. I remember a girl who loved music. She listened to English songs every day and soon started singing along. Her fluency improved quickly because she constantly listened and repeated. Another important point is not to be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are our best teachers. I had a student who was so afraid of making mistakes that she avoided speaking because she thought others would laugh at her. I said, "Don't worry about mistakes. Every mistake is a lesson." One day, she decided to speak in class. He made a lot of mistakes, but he didn't stop. He continued talking, and over time, he got better. Later, she came to me and said, "Teacher, I'm not afraid anymore." That was the moment she started to become fluent. Fluency also involves thinking in English. When you think in English, you start to speak more naturally. I remember a student who always translated from his language to English before speaking. It made him slow and confused. I suggested, try to think in English. Even when you're alone, think about the language. He followed the advice and, little by little, began to express himself more fluidly and confidently. So listen, practice and think in English. The secret is to dive into the language without fear, taking each mistake as a learning opportunity. There was a student who loved to talk. He would talk about any topic, but he faced a problem. He would start the sentence in English and, in the middle, switch to his native language. I told him, try to stick to English. Even if you don't know a word, try to explain it in English. This helped him concentrate, and before long he was speaking only English. Another powerful way to gain fluency is through reading. When you read, you learn how sentences are formed and discover new words. I remember when I was learning English, I read simple books. Whenever I found a new word, I wrote it down and tried to use it in a sentence. This helped me remember words and use them when I spoke. One day, a student came to me with a book. She said, "Teacher, I read this book, but I didn't understand everything." I replied, "Okay, the more you read, the more you will understand." She continued reading every day. After a while, he came back and said to me, "Now I can understand much more." Her fluency improved because she was reading and learning new things daily. Fluency is not about being perfect. It's about consistency. It is the daily habit of listening, reading, speaking, and learning. Every little effort you make today takes you closer to mastering the language. So, keep practicing one step at a time, and you will see progress. Fluency in English also involves listening to yourself. Sometimes recording your own voice speaking can be great practice. I once had a student who did this every day. She would record herself reading a story, then listen to the recording and identify areas she could improve. This practice made her more aware of her own speech, and in a short time, she became fluent. Practicing with a friend is also a fantastic way to improve. I remember two students who were best friends and decided to speak only in English every day. They helped each other with words they didn't know, and over time they both became very fluent. In addition to learning together, they also had fun during the process. Another way to achieve fluency is to use the language in real-life situations. When you go to the market, try to speak in English. When you are with friends, use English as much as you can. The more you practice on a daily basis, the more natural the language becomes. I had a student who worked in a store and decided to only speak English to customers. It was difficult at first, but over time he gained confidence and fluency. The secret is to engage with the language in every way possible, listening, speaking, practicing with friends, and using English in everyday life. The more you dive into this process, the faster the results appear. Fluency is also linked to curiosity. When you hear a new word, don't ignore it. Find out what it means and try using it in your next conversation. I remember a very curious student. Whenever he heard a new word, he would ask me what it meant, and then make sure to use it as much as possible. As a result, his vocabulary grew, and his fluency followed suit. Having a clear objective is also essential. Ask yourself, why do I want to be fluent in English? When you know exactly what you want, you are more motivated. I had a student whose goal was to travel to an English-speaking country. This dream drove her. Every day, she practiced English to be ready for her trip. Even before traveling, he was already fluent, thanks to his focus on his goal. Another tip I always give my students is to enjoy the process. Fluency doesn't happen overnight, but if you enjoy the journey, everything becomes easier. One of my students loved watching films in English. At first, he used subtitles, but over time, he started watching without them. He had fun with the films, and, at the same time, learned. Fluency is about curiosity, purpose, and fun. If you are committed, motivated, and enjoying what you do, learning becomes light and rewarding. Enjoy every step of this journey, and fluency will come naturally. Fluency in English is directly linked to repetition. The more you repeat, the better it gets. I remember a student who loved repeating sentences. Whenever he heard something in class, he would say the phrase several times until he memorized it. Over time, he started using these phrases in everyday conversations, and his confidence grew a lot. Speaking to different people is also a great way to improve your fluency. Each person has a unique way of expressing themselves, and by talking to different people, you learn different communication styles. I once had a very shy student who only talked to me. I encouraged him to talk to other students. At first he was nervous, but little by little he felt more at ease. As a result, he learned new ways of expressing himself, and his fluency improved significantly. Another tip is to practice talking about things you love. When you talk about something you're passionate about, the words come more easily. I had a student who was a football fanatic. Every day, he told me something about the sport. This passion for the subject helped a lot, as he spoke with enthusiasm and practiced constantly. Repetition, interacting with different people, and choosing topics that excite you are powerful strategies for gaining fluency. Engage in the language in a way that matches your interests, and watch as learning becomes more natural and fun. One day, a student asked me, "Teacher, what should I do if I forget a word while speaking?" I said, "Don't stop, keep talking. Sometimes the word will come to your mind later. If not, use another word." This advice helped him stay calm during conversations, without worrying so much about forgetting things. It's important to remember that your brain needs rest too. After a full day of practice, taking time to relax can make all the difference. I met a student who practiced all the time, without breaks. She became exhausted and began to feel frustrated. I told her, "Take a break, rest, come back tomorrow with a fresh mind." After adopting this practice, she felt better and continued to improve her fluency. Another way to develop fluency is to use the language in creative ways. You can write a short story, sing a song, or even record a video. I remember a student who loved to write. Every day, she created short stories in English. This helped her practice new words and phrases. Before long, she began reading her stories aloud, and her fluency improved even further. Teaching what you know is also an excellent way to learn. When you teach, you reinforce knowledge in a practical way. I had a student who was already very fluent and decided to help other classmates. While teaching, he continued to improve his own English. Fluency isn't just about constant practice, it's also about finding balance, being creative, and sharing what you learn. Enjoy the process, try new ways to practice, and remember that rest is part of the journey too. One student decided to help her friends who weren't as fluent as her. She taught them new words and practiced speaking with them. This not only helped her friends, but also made her even more fluent. Teaching is a powerful way to learn, as it reinforces what you already know and encourages you to improve. Having a routine also makes all the difference. Setting a fixed time to practice English daily helps create discipline. I remember a student who practiced for 30 minutes every morning. This was his routine, and he followed it faithfully. Over time, he noticed great improvements in fluency. A routine ensures you practice regularly, which is essential for progress. Furthermore, it is important to be patient with yourself. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. One of my students was very impatient and wanted quick results. When I didn't see immediate progress, I became frustrated. I told him, "Be patient. You are making progress, even if it seems slow." He followed my advice, kept practicing, and over time saw significant improvements and gained confidence. Fluency is also linked to listening. When you listen carefully, you learn how to respond better. I had a student who was an excellent listener. He paid attention carefully before speaking, which made his answers clearer and more elaborate. The key to fluency is teaching, creating a routine, being patient and listening carefully. Every step taken on this journey is an advancement, so keep practicing and enjoy the learning process. Listening carefully is an essential part of becoming fluent. When you listen clearly, you learn to formulate more thoughtful and effective responses. Another important point is to maintain a positive attitude. Learning a new language can be challenging, but a positive mindset makes the process easier. I remember a student who, even though she made mistakes, always smiled and tried again. This attitude helped keep her motivated, and over time, she achieved fluency. Fluency also requires you to be open to new experiences. Sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone. I once had a student who was very confident when speaking in class, but very shy outside of it. I encouraged her to talk to people outside of school. At first she was nervous, but over time she gained confidence and became more fluent. Observing and learning from fluent people is also an excellent strategy. Watch how they speak, pay attention to intonation, and learn from their style. One of my students admired a famous English speaker. She would watch his videos and try to imitate his speaking style. This practice helped her greatly improve her fluency. Fluency is a combination of several elements: practice, patience, attentive listening, conversation, and even learning from mistakes. Each of these parts contributes to your progress. So stay motivated, try new things, and keep learning. Fluency is a worthwhile journey. Fluency in English is like cooking a meal. You need different ingredients, and you have to mix them in the right way. I use this analogy with my students to explain that every part of learning is essential. It's not just about words or grammar, but about how it all connects. Furthermore, it is important to celebrate the small victories. Every new word learned or phrase spoken without hesitation is a reason to celebrate. I had a student who celebrated every achievement, no matter how small. This made her feel proud and motivated to continue. Recognizing your progress, even small ones, helps you stay focused and enthusiastic. A student once asked me, "Teacher, what should I do if I get stuck while speaking?" I responded, "It's okay to pause and think. Take a deep breath and continue." This advice helped him stay calm in difficult situations and handle breaks better. Over time, he learned to manage these moments, and his fluency improved greatly. Practicing what you learn is also essential. If you learn a new word today, try using it tomorrow. I remember a student who challenged himself to learn a new word every day and incorporate it into sentences. This practice helped him memorize vocabulary and use it naturally in conversations. Another important point is to learn from what is around you. You can find learning on signs, posters, and even menus. I had a student who loved exploring the city. Whenever he saw a sign in English, he read it and tried to understand it. This helped him expand his vocabulary and acquire expressions that he could use in conversations. Ultimately, being curious about the culture behind the language makes all the difference. English is spoken in many countries, and each one has its own particularities. One of my students was fascinated by British English. He dedicated time to exploring the way the British speak and communicate. This not only enriched his learning, but also made the experience more fun. Fluency comes from combining all of these elements: practice, curiosity, celebrating achievements, and continuous learning. Every step you take brings you closer to your goal. So, keep practicing, exploring, and challenging yourself. The results are worth it. Watching British shows can be a great way to learn not only the language, but also the culture. I remember a student who did exactly that. He loved exploring different ways of expressing himself, and over time, this helped him greatly improve his fluency. After all, speaking well is not just about words, but also about how you communicate in general. Body language, for example, makes all the difference. When you speak, your gestures and expressions add meaning to your words. I had a student who, even though he used simple sentences, seemed very fluent because his body language was so expressive. This helped him communicate more effectively and engagingly. Another important point is to challenge yourself from time to time. Talking about subjects you don't know can be difficult at first, but it's a great opportunity to learn. I remember a student, passionate about sports, who decided to practice English by talking about science. At first, he had difficulties, but little by little, he learned new words and ideas, becoming more fluent on different topics. Being relaxed is also crucial. When you are calm, words flow more easily. I had a student who was very tense when speaking English. I suggested he take a deep breath before starting to speak. This simple technique helped him relax and, as a result, his fluency improved greatly. Practicing what you learn is essential. If you learned a new word today, try using it tomorrow. Incorporating these words into real conversations makes them more natural to you. Small steps like these make a huge difference on the path to fluency. So, be curious, gesture, explore new topics, and, above all, have fun. Fluency is a process, and every small effort contributes to something bigger. What have you been doing lately to improve your English? Any programs, books, or methods that are working well for you? I would like to know. Tell me in the comments. Learning one new word a day and putting it into practice is a great strategy. I remember a student who did exactly that. He would learn a word and use it in a sentence the next day. This simple practice helped him remember vocabulary and use it naturally in conversations. Another valuable tip is to learn from what is around you. Signs, posters, and even menus can be great allies in learning. I had a student who loved exploring the city and read every sign in English he came across. He tried to understand the meaning and incorporated the new words and phrases into his conversations. This habit helped him enrich his vocabulary in a practical way. Being curious about the language culture also makes a big difference. English is spoken in several countries, and each one has their own unique way of expressing themselves. One of my students was fascinated by British English. He watched UK shows and explored local culture. This not only helped him understand different communication styles, but also contributed to his fluency. Fluency goes beyond words. Your body language can add a lot of meaning to what you say. I remember a student who had very expressive body language, even though he spoke simple sentences. His gestures and expressions made him appear more fluent, helping him communicate more efficiently. Challenging yourself is also essential to grow in the language. Talking about subjects you don't know may seem difficult at first, but it's an excellent way to learn. I had a student who was passionate about sports and decided to talk about science for a change. At first, he encountered difficulties, but over time he learned new words and became more fluent in different topics. Finally, being relaxed is essential. When you are calm, words flow more naturally. I had a student who was very nervous when speaking English. I suggested he take a deep breath before starting. This simple practice helped him feel calmer, which significantly improved his fluency. Fluency is built with small, consistent actions. Learning, exploring, being curious, challenging yourself, and staying calm. Every step matters, and the most important thing is to never give up. How about starting today with a new word or practicing something that challenges you? The journey is worth it. Taking a deep breath before speaking can make a big difference. I remember a student who became very tense when trying to express himself in English. I instructed him to take a few deep breaths before starting to speak. This helped him relax, and his fluency improved significantly. Asking questions is also an excellent way to practice. When you ask, you start conversations. I had a student who was great at this. He would ask colleagues about their day, their hobbies and interests. This practice always kept him engaged in conversations, which greatly contributed to his advancement in fluency. Another important tip is to reflect on your progress. From time to time, take a moment to evaluate how much you've improved. One of my students kept a weekly diary where he wrote about his learning in English. This practice helped him see progress and motivated him to continue. Fluency also involves flexibility. Sometimes you may need to rephrase something you said to be clearer. I remember a student who mastered this skill. If someone didn't understand what he was saying, he would change the sentence until it was clear. This ability to adapt to different situations has made him more confident and fluent. Finally, it is essential to connect with other people. Language learning doesn't have to be lonely. Participating in conversations, exchanging experiences, and learning from others makes the journey lighter and more fun. Every little effort takes you closer to your goal, so keep practicing and celebrating each achievement. Learning from other people can transform your English learning journey. When you share your experiences and practice in a group, the process becomes more dynamic and motivating. I had a student who joined an English club. Every week, she would meet with other apprentices to practice. This not only helped her feel more motivated, but also significantly improved her fluency. Setting small, achievable goals also makes all the difference. Instead of saying, "I want to be fluent," try smaller goals, like "I want to learn 5 new words this week." I remember a student who did exactly that. She created simple goals, and each time she achieved them, she felt more confident. Over time, these small steps added up, and she reached an impressive level of fluency. Persistence is another essential ingredient. Learning English can be challenging, but giving up is not an option. I remember a student who had a lot of difficulties at the beginning and wanted to give up several times. But he kept practicing, and one day he realized he was speaking much more fluently. His determination paid off. Reviewing what you have already learned is also very important. Going back to old lessons and reviewing your notes can reinforce what you know and boost your confidence. One of my students did this monthly. She reviewed her notebooks and, as a result, was able to better remember the words and structures she had learned. Keeping an open mind is another valuable skill. English has many variations and ways of expressing yourself. I had a student who was very curious about different accents and dialects. He loved learning how people from different regions spoke. This curiosity made him more adaptable and fluent in different contexts. Finally, find something you love about English and use that as motivation. It could be a book, a film, a song, or even poetry. I remember a student who loved poetry in English. Every day she read poems, and it not only inspired her, but also enriched her vocabulary and understanding of the language. Fluency is a combination of practice, patience, curiosity, and passion for the language. Every little action counts, and the most important thing is to enjoy the process. How about setting a goal for this week, or discovering something new in English that you love? Falling in love with the language is a big step towards improving your fluency. I remember a student who read poetry and tried to understand it. This practice not only sparked her passion for English, but also helped her express herself better. Additionally, asking for feedback is essential. Whenever you speak, ask someone to tell you how it was. I had a student who did this regularly. He asked me what was good and what needed improvement. The feedback helped him identify weaknesses and recognize his progress. Another effective way to learn is using flashcards. Write new words on cards and review them frequently. One of my students did this daily. He created flashcards for each new word he learned and reviewed it every day. This practice helped him remember vocabulary and use it naturally in conversations. Silences are also important in fluency. Sometimes you need a moment to think before you speak. I had a student who was afraid of silence. He thought he needed to speak immediately. I told him, it's okay to pause and think. After that, he began to feel more comfortable, and his speech became clearer and more confident. Learning whole sentences, rather than isolated words, also makes all the difference. One of my students focused on learning expressions and complete sentences. This made her sentences more natural and fluent as she understood how the words worked together. Curiosity about the world is another factor that drives fluency. The more you learn about different cultures and ideas, the more things you have to talk about. A student of mine loved studying history, and it gave him lots of ideas to discuss in English. Learning a language is not just about words. It's about connecting with the world and sharing your unique vision. The path to fluency is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Just like a river that constantly flows towards the ocean, your daily efforts will take you closer and closer to your goal. Fluency is not just about speaking easily. It's about building bridges to new understandings, friendships, and connections. So keep learning, keep practicing, and let your voice be heard. And now, I want to know, what inspires you to continue on this journey to fluency? I'd love to hear your story.